You never know how the word may find somebody. Offer a word of hope and encouragement. Not for me to decide. Oh, wow, y'all are like... Y'all be in the view of the camera if you're not careful.
Her look all right?
Oh. Oh, no, I've got a lot for you all tonight, so...
Well, we was going down, all that was out there was Jerry.
Well, with the weather forecast and it being the holidays, here comes Debbie. We'll get her on up there. Come on down, Debbie. You're the next contestant on. Oh. Psalm 46 is where we're going to be tonight. I was wanting to ask you all what made you got 2 days left in 2021. What made does anything make your top 10 list of 2021? Either like in your life or didn't get COVID. That could definitely be, that could definitely make the top 10. 46, Psalm 46. New baby, that definitely makes a top 10 list. Well, that could rank up there. That might break the top 10. Miss Terry is a miracle. Surviving a near death, that's a miracle. Definitely rank up there. I read one list today. I was just kind of Googling to see, and it said 2021 was kind of boring, there wasn't really anything. Kind of, I guess depends on who you're asking, who you're talking to. So Psalm 46, we kind of thought about it or introduced it a little bit a couple of weeks ago because there's really the beginning and the end of it. If you've kind of been around the Bible or read it any at all, there's two verses one at the beginning and one at the end that are very familiar. God is my refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Opens it. And that's one that's hopefully very familiar. Towards the end, there's one that says, be still and know that I am God. And so you may see paintings, pictures, things framed around these verses that contain it. So what is the context? Why does somebody write it? Why does somebody write these words? Well, again, if you've read the Bible at any length at all, whether in the Old Testament or the New Testament, you say, oh man, there's a lot of, well, nobody in the New Testament, nobody in the Old Testament was writing it because of anything in the New Testament. Does that make sense? So it had to have been an event prior to the writing of that. So what occurrence is making them have these thoughts or these considerations regarding God as somebody who's a safe place, a safe person. They're protectors. God is a provider. So basically this psalm is broken down into considering God as a refuge, a resource, and a ruler. So when you think about it like that, well, man, you could read a lot of Old Testament stories and say, well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be that. In studying this, a lot of scholars thought it was back when King Hezekiah was king over Jerusalem, over the southern part of Israel. And many kings prior to him had not been good kings. They had not done what was right in the sight of God, and they had set up a lot of idol worship. And so when King Hezekiah, I think what I read today said King Hezekiah was like 25 years old when he became king, and he ruled for like 29 years. And in his reign, what he did was he started trying to right all the wrongs. In other words, he started to tear down all the idol worship. But there was still, if you talk about how trying to clean up corruption, there was a lot of corruption to try to clean up. But many scholars, it seems, believe that the writing of this psalm is an afterthought of when the king of Assyria, King Sennacherib, say that 5 times real fast, King Sennacherib made verbal and written threats to King Hezekiah that he was going to destroy Jerusalem, destroy him, take the people, take the city. Basically, I'm coming to get you. Ain't nothing can stop me. Nobody's been able to stop me yet. So who do you think you are? And who do you think your God is? And you're trying to do all this. You're trying to do all this God stuff, and I'm just going to come get you because I've been getting everybody else, and so you're the next in line. So verbal threats are coming, and finally written threats are coming. And you can find this, you can read about it in 2 Kings 18, 19, 20. You can kind of read when Hezekiah becomes king and the threats that come. So basically the final thing before the attack is a letter. They finally just write it down. And it's sent to Hezekiah. And Hezekiah gets this letter. And I'm going to try not to lose my place here real quick. So Hezekiah received the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. And then Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord God of Israel, the one who dwells between the cherubim, you are God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see and hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to reproach the living God. Truly, Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands and have cast their gods into the fire. For they will not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they destroyed them. Now, therefore, O Lord our God, I pray, save us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you are the Lord God, you alone. So he gets the letter. So basically he comes to what? He comes to church. He's got the letter. Where does he put it? Where do you think he puts it? He puts it on the altar. He lays it before the Lord. And in laying the letter before the Lord, what's he also do? He lays himself before the Lord, doesn't he? He probably, and this is, I guess, kind of an assumption. We don't know his posture, but he could have very well done what? You know? Oh Lord, you know exactly what this letter says. You know what the threats are, but I know who you are, and I'm believing and trusting in you. Right? Isn't that what he did? And the Lord answered. And the Lord spoke. And there's a long answer in chapter 19, but let's fast forward to the end of chapter 19. And it came to pass on a certain night that the angel of the Lord went out and killed in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when people arose early in the morning, there were the corpses all dead, So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went away, returned home, and remained at Nineveh. Now listen to this. Now it came to pass, as he was worshiping, King Sennacherib worshiping, in the temple of Nisroch, his god, that his sons, Adramelech and Sharezer, struck him down with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Aram. Pretty cool story, huh? So, scholars think it's very possible Psalm 46 was written with that context, with that story in mind. Now, let's set a little more context, okay? Let's bring it into closer to our time frame. Martin Luther, okay? Martin Luther is one of the key figures in church history, a man mightily used by God to bring reformation to the church. The year 1527 was the most difficult of his life. After 10 demanding years of leading the Reformation, a dizzy spell overcame him in the middle of a sermon in April of that year, forcing him to stop preaching. Luther feared for his life. On July 6th, while eating dinner with friends, he felt an acute buzzing in his ear and lay down, again convinced he was at the end of his life. He partially regained his strength, but a debilitating discouragement set in as a result. In addition, heart problems and severe intestinal complications escalated the pains of death. Of this ordeal, Luther wrote, "I spent more than a week in death and hell. My entire body was in pain, and I still tremble. Completely abandoned by Christ, I labored under the vacillations and storms of desperation and blasphemy against God." And it goes on and says, what is worse, the Black Plague came, and everybody's leaving Germany, and they stayed. And his home, they said, turned into a hospital where he watched many of his friends die. Then, without warning, Luther's one-year-old son became desperately ill. With death surrounding him on every side, Luther was driven to seek refuge in God as never before. Psalm 46 became the strength of his soul. And not only that, but it led him to write a hymn called "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." I don't know if you're familiar with that one or not. I listened to it a couple of times today. So that's in one of the darkest times of Martin Luther's life. Where did he go in a time of trouble? He went to Psalm 46. So let's look at this in its 3 parts. Verses 1 through 3. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. So there's the first part. God is our refuge, and he's our strength, a very present help in trouble. So it doesn't, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, it doesn't say from trouble, right? Which means what? You're going to have trouble, right? Just part of life. Nobody really, well, I thought about this. Sometimes trouble finds us, right? It just happens. But what about when we find trouble? In other words, some of the trouble that you encounter is not your fault, right? You didn't cause it, you didn't create it, you didn't ask for it. It's just, whether it's family trouble, financial trouble, health trouble, I don't know, name any, we could list a lot of them, right? Sometimes it's of no fault. But what about when you're the cause? Have you ever thought about that? Is God still a refuge and a strength if you're the cause of the trouble? Or is he just like, sorry? Well, it depends on how I guess where your heart is, I guess, is it you're just sorry because you got caught? Or are you really remorseful, right? So, can God be your refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble, if you're the cause of trouble? He can, if you do what? Repent, right? That's the key. That's the key. And I was reading earlier, and this point was just very well brought to the surface. We have to be very careful. You can learn a lot from the Bible about how to have a good marriage and have healthy finances and raise good kids and never get right with God. Have you thought about that? But if you live life, and it's not wrong to have a good marriage and healthy finances and raise good kids, those are all good things, right? But if you personally never get right with God and never repent, my goodness, you could live a halfway decent life and then and what happened? Die and go to hell. That would be horrible, wouldn't it? I wonder if that's happening. They're just trying to live life to stay out of trouble, and yet they've never repented and really got their heart right with God. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. So yeah, when you face unexpected, health crisis, family crisis, financial crisis, people threaten you, God is what? He is there. He is safe. He is strength. And I've been reminded of this recently. And maybe it's just a play on words, and there's really no necessarily magic power in words, but if we're not feeling very strong, we'll often pray what? God, give me what? Give me strength. Well, what about asking for Him to be our strength? Again, maybe it's just a little play on words, but sometimes in doing that, it can make us think, because in saying, well, give me strength, who are we staying still going to try to do it? I'm still going to try to do it. You just need to give me a little more strength. And like me going to the gym and, instead of bench pressing 100 pounds, I can pray and say, Lord, I want to bench press 150 pounds today. Let me do that. You think God's just going to instantaneously give Gary the strength to go from benching 100 pounds to 150 pounds? No. And so think about it that way. Just not for Him to give you strength, but to be your strength. Because that's the reality of it, isn't it? It's Christ in us. It's the fruits of the Spirit in us, not us trying to operate from flesh. No. So we don't have to fear. We don't have to be afraid. I'm sure Hezekiah probably had a little fear when he got the letter, but we don't have to. And then it just mentions, like, the earth can be removed, the mountains be carried into the sea, waters roar, floods, earthquakes. Just think about Forecast for possible tornadoes tonight, right? You can go to bed tonight and say, God is my refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. I don't have to fear. I don't have to be afraid. I can fall asleep. Often people wonder, though, in natural disasters, is that the judgment of God? Is that God trying to get people's attention? Back in 2005, when after Hurricane Katrina hit Mississippi, New Orleans, Louisiana, that area down through there. I mean, it was a stretch that it hit. But I was there on a chainsaw crew, and the chainsaw crew would be working on one job, and then I would have the paperwork for the next job, and I would kind of be like the scout. You know, I would go ahead to the next job and see, hey, can we get the truck there? Can we get the equipment there? And I found myself down right on the coast, and amidst all of this, like devastation and debris and everything, there was this little old lady, and she was out on the sidewalk, sweeping the sidewalk. And just not maybe a couple hundred yards in the distance was a casino that was out in the ocean, or the ocean was in the, I don't know. I can't remember which one it was. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if it had been picked up and moved out, or if that's how far the water had come in. And I just, you know, hi, hello, you know, just exchanged a few pleasantries. And I said, you know, I was just asking people, I said, how are you doing in your spirit? I was just trying to ask her. I was trying to ask her, how are you doing, without it seeming kind of empty? Does that make sense? Like, how do you ask somebody after a hurricane, well, how are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean, how am I doing? I'm not doing good at all. But anyway, I was just, how are you doing in your spirit? I was trying to be, you know, just make it a little more meaningful. And she whipped around and she pointed at that casino out in the water, and she was like, God's trying to get a hold of them and get their attention and tell them he's real. And blah, 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 blah. She just like, okay, so you're good? But that's kind of how she was thinking. Is she wrong for thinking that way? I mean, that's not really for us to judge. So, he's a refuge, okay? He's a safe place. He is our strength, and he is with us in trouble. Okay. Now, the verses 4 through 6 identify him not as just a refuge, but as a resource, okay? You know, the Apostle Paul would say, my God shall supply all your riches, shall supply all your needs according to his riches and glory, okay? So, there is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacle of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. The nations raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, earth melted. Now, if we're thinking about King Hezekiah, and we're thinking about the city of Jerusalem, where he was king, there's one kind of little thing about this that we need to. So, if you were going to back in those days, if you were going to establish a city, what was critical to the livelihood of a city? Water. Water had to be close, right? A waterway, right? A stream, a river, something. But there's not one in Jerusalem. There's not a river. So, where Where are you going to get your water? But in Jerusalem, on the east side, there's a spring. It's the spring of Gihon, Gihon. And so what Hezekiah did, so you've probably not heard of the spring of Gihon before, right? Probably kind of new. But you have heard of the pool of Siloam, right? Because it was there that Jesus healed a blind man, right? Lame. So here's what King Hezekiah did. King Hezekiah had men start at the pool of Siloam, at the spring of Gihon, and they dug an underground tunnel until they met in the middle. The tunnel is about 2,000 feet long. And it carried water from the spring of Gihon down to the pool of Siloam. So if there ever was a siege, if there ever was an attack, they had what? They had water in the pool of Siloam. And guess what Glenda and I got to do when we traveled to Israel? We got to walk. No, we got to walk in Hezekiah's tunnel. We got to walk through the water in that tunnel. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. And you're like, well, how did they dig that tunnel? How did they know? Right? How do you... I read a little bit about it, and some say they followed. There was like a crack in the rock underneath that they kind of... Other things I watched and learned was that they had like the guys on top would do like soundings, like they would like, hey, we're here, and kind of give them. We talk about God things. That's a God thing right there. Okay, I mean, in that time for that tunnel, for those guys to meet, can you imagine the probability? How far is 2,000 feet? Half a mile? Nearly a half a mile. I mean, can you imagine, really? It's just, but anyway. So that just kind of helps us understand when he writes stuff like, there is a river whose streams shall make glad the city of God. God is in the midst of her. But it helps us to understand when Jesus is, and as we've just walked through John chapter 4, he's talking about this fountain of living water being where? Being in us. That's flowing out because God is in the midst of her. God is in the midst of us. God shall help her. God shall help us just at the break of dawn. Psalm 30, verse 5. We walked through that one a few months ago. For his anger is but for a moment. His favor is for life. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Giving us the reminder that an element of God's love is discipline. An element of God's love is there will be difficult days. An element of God's love is we will face trouble, we will face trials, we will face temptations. Sometimes it just finds us, sometimes we find it. But in either situation, when we come to reconcile with God and we come to realize that he loves us and he wants the best for us and he is going to be with us regardless of what's going on, then we can say, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. God shall help her just at the break of dawn. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. That's the other beautiful thing about God is he just has to speak, right? How did the nobleman's son, you remember from Sunday, how did the nobleman's son experience healing? Was it because he went to where the nobleman lived? How did it happen? He just spoke it, right? Yeah, he may have been a little frustrated. He may have been a little emotional, right? You say, you just want to see another sign, you just want me to do something great. And he was like, oh, please, I just want my son to be healed. Okay, go. That's it. He just spoke, right? That's the beauty of it. He just has to speak. And so it gives us, it makes us think too, not just what kinds of trouble people go through or that we experience, but where do people go when they have trouble? You thought about that? Where do people go? Most times they go, they may go to a bar, they may go to a doctor, they'll go, I mean, you know, right? I mean, you know the places and things that people, whether it's a unhealthy thought pattern maybe, or whether it's a pill or a person or a drug or a drink or whatever, that's where people go, right? That's because that gives an often temporary ease, right, to the trouble. Never a lasting solution, but just a temporary ease. But notice what he says there in verse 7. The Lord of hosts is with us. Again, just a reminder of his presence. The God of Jacob is our refuge. And we've talked about this before. Why didn't he say the God of Noah? The God of Abraham? The God of Moses? Why does he say Jacob? The God of Jacob. Who was Jacob? Wasn't Jacob a deceiver and a cheat and a swindler and I'm going to get what I want and I'm just thinking about me. I don't care who it hurts or how I have to get it. I'm just going to get it kind of guy? Wasn't that Jacob? And then on his way back to meet his brother, and he wanted God to bless him. Bless me, God's like, I'm going to bless you like that. You're going to have to tell me who you are. In other words, get honest with me about who you are. So when I think of Jacob, maybe this is not a very spiritual way to look at it, but think of Jacob, think of a jughead. And when you think of a jughead, think, well, if he's a God of jugheads, then he can be a God of me. Right? Well, haven't we all kind of operated the way Jacob operated sometimes? The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. And so then, he's refuge, he's resource, and then he's a ruler. Verse 8, come, behold the works of the Lord who has made desolations in the earth. He makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and cuts the spear in two. He burns the chariot in the fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. Paul said in Philippians chapter 2, listen to this. Therefore God has highly exalted him, who? Jesus, and given him, who? Jesus, the name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, of those in heaven and those on earth, and of those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Now we've also talked about the idea of being still and know that I am God. So Zayden is at your house a lot of times, right? Kason is at your house sometimes too. You have grandkids and kids at your house too, right? Sometimes you tell them, be still, right? Della, you have to tell Arthur sometimes, just be still, right? Just be still, right? Would you just sit down for a few minutes, Be still, be still, be still. But now, if you tell a 5-year-old, be still, how long does that last? Not long. I mean, you have to almost entice them with something, right? Now, if you're be still for 5 minutes, then we'll do this or whatever, or you'll get this. That's not what he's saying. I mean, it is, but it isn't. What he's saying is, stop fighting against me. Stop striving. Stop struggling. Just surrender is what he's saying. You can't fight against me. I am ruler. Now, there were a lot of kings. Israel had a lot of kings. Many of them not good at all, right? But he says, God is the one who is in ultimate control. It does you no good to fight against me. Be still. I thought of this story, and I don't know why I thought of it. Maybe it won't make sense. I'm not really sure. But growing up, we had English setter bird dogs. My dad liked to do a little quail hunting. Well, periodically, they needed their toenails clipped. And so here, Becky and me and my sister, this dog laying on the picnic table. And it was mine and her job to hold this dog down while Dad clipped the toenails of the dog. Now, you tell me how well that went over. I mean, what's the dog doing? Oh, thrashing, flopping, and just, and I can remember one time that, I mean, I was just like traumatized. I was just like, and Dad just had to stop and just kind of, hey, get a hold of yourself. I need you to hold this dog, I mean, it's like, oh my goodness. But isn't that how we feel about God sometimes? Just like, let me go. And it's like, we think, it's like, well, he's trying to hold me down and he's trying to hurt me or he's trying to do this. And we're just like, just let me go. And he's just saying, no, just be still. Stop fighting against me. Stop striving against me. Just surrender. And it's that place that we come to, just like Hezekiah, and we can say, God, I got this. And, I'm just going to come to you. And so you and I have this, right? We can go to God. We have the altar where we can go to God. We have this where we can come to God. And that should be our number one go-to. Our number one place is to go to God. All right. All right, we'll transition to our prayer time and pray for Rick Larity. Darlene texted and said that